I have the wonderful Shelby Graham, director of the Sesnon Gallery, here in the house, and she has brought an amazing artist. I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce Christine Wertheim. Christine is a CalArts teacher and much, much more. She's a poet, performer, curator, author of 8 books, critic, and she is bringing an incredible art project, a community art project called the Crochet Coral Reef Project. And that's why, of course, we had Shelby here today, because this project is amazing and a little complicated. Wouldn't you say, Shelby, from your usual Sesnon Gallery exhibits?
Right. It's all-encompassing. It involves so many people and the whole community.
That's right. And so Crochet Coral Reef, CO2CA to CO2LA Ocean. And this is a piece that was created with Christine and her sister, Margaret Wertheim, and the Institute for Figuring. And today, luckily, we have the entire hour, so there's so much to talk about. And the Crochet Coral Reef project begins February 10th, although I think it already did begin.
No,
but
it just...
the exhibit itself begins February 10th and will be up until May 6th. And so on this Friday, February 10th, we begin with the artist talk. You'll be able to come and hear Christine Wertheim talk at 4 p.m. in the Digital Arts Research Center, DARC 108. Christine, are you talking with anybody?
I don't think so. I think it's just me.
Yep.
It's you. I was thinking Donna Haraway, because I know you two work together. And
yes, we did a panel in October or November, but I don't think she's talking at this event.
Oh, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Of
but
course.
We'll start with the Institute for Arts and Sciences and give an intro and talk about the whole project and how it came to Santa Cruz.
Right. So the exhibition will be at the Mary Porter Sesnon Art Gallery, and again, it begins February 10th, and it was brought here through the Institute of the Arts and Sciences. This is a project that has been around the world, and you've been working on this 11 years, is that correct,
yes.
Christine?
Yes.
And this Crochet Coral Reef has been to many exhibits, many museums, and we're so lucky for it to be coming here at the Mary Sesnon Gallery. And then there is the wonderful reception that everybody's going to want to come to. Of course, everyone's going to want to hear Christine talk at 4 p.m., but at 5 p.m., 5 to 7 will be the art reception at the Mary Porter Sesnon Art Gallery, right? And we invite everyone to come. We'll have parking passes available to purchase in the lots, both the performing arts lots for the lecture, and then at the Porter College lot. And that our reception's from 5 to 7. And we're hoping the rain is going to vanish by then, and we'll have a beautiful reception right there in the koi pond area, and as well as in the gallery. So we have a beautiful reception planned. And we need to make sure everyone knows that this is free and open to the public. All of the events that we're going to be talking about, because there are quite
Absolutely.
a few kind of pieces to this exhibition, Crochet Coral Reef. And then on Saturday, February 11th, from 2 to 4 p.m., you will be able to have an artist meet and greet with Christine Wertheim at the Mary Porter Sesnon Art Gallery. Also, there will be an opening and a reception for the UC Santa Cruz Satellite Reef that will be happening May 4th. And this is going to be at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. And so just to begin a little bit, to give our dear audience a kind of an overview, perhaps, of what the Crochet Coral Reef Project is, perhaps, Christine, you can tell us a little bit about how did it begin?
It began in 2005. My sister started this institute called the Institute for Figuring, and the aim of the institute is to bring ideas from science, maths and engineering to a general public who don't normally know very much about science, because it's very difficult for science to be communicated to people without serious education in these disciplines. And so my sister, who's always been a science communicator and science journalist, she decided to have this institute in which we would bring ideas from the sciences and maths and engineering to the general public via having scientists actually give lectures and talk about their work, and obviously Margaret had to do a lot of wrangling to sort of help the scientists to get them to be able to talk to a general public. But we specifically chose scientists who had material elements to their practice, so that people could actually have hands-on, physical, tactile, visual experiences rather than just sort of seeing everything written in equations. And one of the first people we worked with was a woman called Dana Taimina, who had developed a way of using crochet to model a particular kind of surface called a hyperbolic plane. And there are three kind of geometrical surfaces. There's a flat Euclidean one, there's the surface of a ball, and there's the opposite of a ball, which is, if you imagine everything going away from itself, a bit like the edges of lettuces. And mathematicians had formally discovered this kind of geometry, this kind of plane in the mid-19th century, but for a long time they thought that you couldn't physically make one in real 3D space. And then there's a slightly complicated bit, but basically Dana figured out how to do it in crochet, because as well as being a mathematician, she was a crochet sort of hobbyist. And so she'd been making these models for some time, and so we did lectures with her, and she'd wave these models. She made them on quite a large scale, and she'd wave these models around and talk about hyperbolic geometry, which has very different properties than Euclidean geometry. For instance, they're parallel lines curve away from each other. They don't stay the same distance, as it were. And anyway, so Dana... So once Margaret and I got introduced to this idea, we started crocheting as well, making these models, because it's very interesting to do it. It's physically and conceptually it's interesting to make them. But whereas Dana's and Margaret's models, because they both sort of come from that mathematic background, whereas their models looked very kind of perfect, and they did them in colours that made them look like mathematical models. I'm not that kind of person, so I started doing them in pink fluffy wool and green sparkly wool. And so my models started immediately looking very organic, and also I didn't do them perfectly. I sort of deviated slightly from the code. It's a very simple algorithm to make them, but you don't even need a recipe. But I started deviating and doing them in these non-model-y looking wools, and I had a pile of them on the coffee table. And one day I said to Margaret, "Oh, look, it looks like a coral reef. We could crochet a coral reef." And I always like to say I put it in the conditional tense. We could crochet a coral reef. And then Margaret immediately went and put up a sign on the IFF website. "Oh, we are crocheting a coral reef. Would people like to come and join us?" And then literally 2 weeks later, we got an invitation from the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh asking us if we'd like to contribute a coral reef or two to this upcoming show they had on global warming and environmental art. And we thought, oh my God, we don't have any coral reefs. So we put out another call, we really need you citizens to help us make this coral reef. And that's when we had our first show. And the reefs in that show were very small. And then we got invited to the Chicago Cultural Center, and we had like a 30,000 square foot room, which we were supposed to fill. And so we had to get crocheting like mad and getting as many people as possible. But as we knew that even with contributors helping us, we couldn't fill that space. So we decided that what we would do is we would ask the people of Chicago to do their own reef, and we call those reefs the people reefs. So mostly when we do a show, there's our reefs, the ones we curate and put together, and we have about 40 or 50 contributors who over the years we've collected who help us with those, but we curate them. And then we have a people's reef, where the people in that state or that city or that country, if it's a small country, make their own reef, and they're the people's reefs, and they get exhibited alongside ours. And in the beginning in Chicago, when we first did this, the galleries were not very happy about having the amateurs exhibit their work alongside the professionals. In fact, they really didn't want it at all, but we persuaded them, and in fact that has ultimately become one of the biggest aspects of the project. And in fact, the people's reefs often turn out to be much, much larger than ours, and our reefs are just sort of like the little grain of sand in the oyster that sparks the pearl that becomes the people's reef.
Oh, that's wonderful. You're listening to Christine Wertheim. She's talking about the Crochet Coral Reef project, which is coming Friday, here to UC Santa Cruz at the Sesnon Gallery in Porter College. You created this with your sister and the Institute for Figuring, the IFF.org, if anyone's interested in going to the Institute for Figuring, and to find out about this LA-based nonprofit that's engaging the public about scientific and mathematical issues. The Crochet Reef, it's interesting how you say resides, that is, it lives at the intersection of math, marine biology, handicraft, community art practice. Would you say also feminist practice?
Yes. Margaret, as a science communicator and journalist, her main aim has always been to communicate ideas about science specifically to women. I mean, she's interested in the general public, but she's specifically interested in communicating to women because there are a lot less women in all of the sciences even today, and women don't typically show much interest in going into science, and so she's always wanted to sort of propel more women to be interested in the sciences because science now dominates so much of, the modern world, and if women aren't participating in it, they're not shaping particularly how technology develops and how technology affects us. So there's definitely a feminist element to it on that level, but I think there's also another feminist element, which is not something that we planned, which is simply that 99.9% of the contributors, both to the reefs that we make and to the people's reefs, are women. Now, you can say, oh, well, I suppose that's kind of quite what's surprising about that. It's that the technique that you're using is crochet, but we do have a few men. There have been men over the years who've contributed, but we naively thought that there might be more men, and in fact there's turned out to be very, very, very few men. It's almost exclusively women. So on that level, the project is feminist in the sense that it simply engages women, but I think that the feminist angle, apart from it just simply being made by women, is that, as it turns out, some of the people who come and get really engaged with the project are people who've never crocheted before and they just fall in love with it. But the majority of them are people who've had quite a lot of experience at crocheting, and in fact they're kind of handicraft nuts who have like entire rooms full of wool in their houses. And what they all say to us, and this has been repeated to us over and over again across the 11 years, is that these women feel completely unvalorised in their creative handicraft work, that they do this, they make stuff all the time and everybody thinks it's just horrible and not interesting and thinks it's boring, so they have no support and no valorisation for this work, and then they contribute to the Crochet Coral Reef, and the reefs get shown in galleries and science museums, and they feel like at last somebody has actually valorised their work. And I think it's interesting that what men do, even on the hobby level, what men do as hobbies, like, I don't know, fix the car or make ships and put them in bottles, people admire this kind of work. And even outsider art, most of it is made by men. It seems as if the stuff that women do is just not seen as art in any sense of the word. So raising this, what is in our society seen as feminine handicraft, to the level of something that people can appreciate as art, I think is in itself a kind of feminist gesture.
That's wonderful. Christine Wertheim, she's talking about the Crochet Coral Reef project.